Visi Indonesia Emas 2045 merupakan upaya monumental bagi bangsa kita untuk berdaulat, maju, adil, dan sejahtera. Visi ini menguraikan ambisi yang berani untuk menempatkan Indonesia di antara 5 besar dunia. Untuk benar-benar bertransformasi menjadi negara maju, Indonesia harus meningkatkan PDB per kapita hingga mencapai $12.000 Amerika Serikat pada tahun 2035. Pencapaian tonggak sejarah ini akan mendorong perekonomian nasional kita dari 1,5 triliun rupiah menjadi 4 hingga 4,5 triliun. Menjadikan Indonesia sebagai negara dengan perekonomian terbesar ke-7 di dunia. Dalam upaya ini, produktivitas muncul sebagai faktor penting. Hal ini bukan hanya tentang meningkatkan output ekonomi, tetapi juga mendorong pembangunan manusia, ketahanan, dan kesejahteraan. Menjamin masa depan masyarakat Indonesia pun menjadi vital untuk memulai perjalanan transformatif ini.
Pada tahun 2045, Indonesia akan memasuki usia ke-100 dan kita tentu saja memiliki ambisi untuk memasuki era emas, Indonesia Emas. Nah, untuk mencapai target itu tentu banyak sekali yang harus kita lakukan, apalagi kita berharap bahwa pada saat itu perekonomian Indonesia sudah menjadi salah satu yang terbesar di dunia, mungkin ya kalau bisa nomor 7, dan income per kapitanya atau PDB ya bisa mencapai $12.000 ya per kapita. Nah, tentu saja kita harus menjadi masyarakat yang produktif, negara yang sangat kreatif, dan tentu saja di mana masyarakatnya itu memiliki kesejahteraan dan ambisi maupun mimpi untuk meraih masa depan yang baik. Nah, bagaimana menjadi masyarakat yang tangguh, masyarakat yang bisa memiliki masa depan yang indah. Saat ini saya sudah ditemani oleh Country Manager dari suatu perusahaan asuransi yang ada di Indonesia, di Allianz Indonesia. Dia adalah Alexander Grenz. Hello, how are you, Alex?
Very good. Hi, Desi, and thank you for having me today.
And thank you for having me. And saat ini saya berada di kantor Allianz yang berada di WTC Sudirman. Alex, because your Indonesian is not quite up to scratch yet.
That's very flattering, but
we've only been here for 6 months,
yeah.
Okay, as country manager of Allianz Indonesia. But before that, I hear, for 7 years, you were in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And before that in Singapore. So you know the region.
A little bit, I would say, yeah.
Perhaps you could just, in your 6 months, what do you make of Indonesia so far? What have you learned about Indonesia in terms of the people, the economy, and especially compared with other countries in ASEAN?
Yeah. So I think, except I haven't learned much about Bahasa Indonesia, but I'm trying to do. I will hope in future I will be able to understand and speak a little bit more in Bahasa. What I've learned about Indonesia is, first of all, it's one of the largest countries, the largest populations in the world. And I think with that having the biggest opportunity in the Southeast Asian region. And hence we are also very committed to this region, and especially in Indonesia. For me personally, very exciting. I came from, I would say, quite similar market, maybe not as developed yet as it is, but Philippines has a lot of parallels, I would see. From the past 7 years I've spent there. But then coming here to Indonesia, you see the development and the ambition towards what you mentioned earlier, I think about the Vision 2045, really driving the economy. And what I've seen is, what I've learned is surprisingly that the economy is growing stably, really 5%, and except a very tiny dip during the pandemic where everybody else suffered much more. Indonesia is managing a very, very strong growth rate on a steady basis. So with that, I think it's tremendously promising over other countries here in the region And I wouldn't be surprised when this 100-year anniversary comes, and Indonesia might be one of the top 5 economies in the world, and definitely bigger than Germany by then.
Yeah, you mentioned you're from Germany.
Yes.
I mean, of course, Allianz is it's
German
company, and it's an old company, right? I hear.
Yeah, pretty old. So we are celebrating 133 years by now. We were established in 1890 in Berlin as that time non-life insurer for particular corporate risks. And yeah, Allianz has been part of the history of Germany for a long time, and also the journey towards becoming a developed market. I think only by 1900 we have been one of the thriving economies, and then we know after the World War II we had our particular thrive as an industrial country, and had significant surplus in our exports, which brought us to the 4th largest or 3rd largest economy currently in the world, dependent on currency exchange rates with Japan.
And when did it move into Southeast Asia? How long ago are we talking about?
Allianz moved into Indonesia in 1990 for the first, or 1980 for the first time. We had a representative office.
It was the first time in Indonesia. But what about in the region?
In the region,
is Indonesia one of the first countries that Allianz entered?
One of the first, yeah, definitely. We had some representative offices, we call it, because that time it was very centralized corporate insurance, and therefore we opened offices mostly to represent and sell and present Allianz as a possible insurer. But I would say the stronger approach was when we entered the retail business, so really establishing full-fledged entities, getting insurance licenses in the countries. And here Indonesia is one of the later ones, I would say. In life insurance, we only started here in 1996.
So is Indonesia one of your bigger markets in terms of in Southeast Asia or in ASEAN countries? Or
in Southeast Asia, I think it's still the biggest country in terms of our business, but also in terms of opportunity. It's going to be the strongest position we have. Predominantly here is life and health insurance, but we have all lines of businesses represented.
But in terms of volume, how many would you say that?
So this year we are targeting around 4.2 trillion in APE, which is average premium collected in a year. And that represents a bit of a growth rate of 15%, I would say, plus minus end of the year. In the total region ASEAN, that would be on the life and health insurance side around 40%, I would say, of our total business. Our next biggest or the largest business we have in Asia context is Taiwan. In Taiwan, we have the biggest life and health insurers, and in euro terms, producing around 2 billion in premium every year, versus we are around 1 billion euro, so twice as big, but different business model, different market, very high insurance penetration there compared to here. If you really have this trajectory of constant growth, we have to build, first of all, human capital. We have to build resilience, otherwise we will always do a step back.
Right, which goes back to my idea about Indonesia wanting to be sort of a developed, basically, a country by 2045. We're still sort of in the middle income. Hopefully, we're not going to fall into the middle income trap, and hopefully our economy will continue to grow. I'm just interested when the insurance industry starts looking eastwards, like to a country like Indonesia, which is still very much in the process of developing. What sort of strategy and what is it actually looking for? And more specifically, when you entered Indonesia back in the 90s, what were the main challenges or the differences in terms of how you approached the industry?
first of all, why are we looking strategically? Southeast Asia is clearly demographics and the large part of population.
Lots of people here,
So
and most of them are actually young. I mean, this is what we call our demographic.
So the majority of this population here, they will come into the really productive stage in about 20 years, when this is supposed to be a developed country and developed market, and I'm very confident this is gonna happen. So hence we have also developed our strategy towards these markets. We are represented in countries with larger populations like Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia. Malaysia smaller, but also well presented already. And the emphasis is here looking into the long-term future. When you enter into a market, it's quite a strong commitment, and it's a lot of capital required to run, especially life insurance businesses, which give sometimes guarantees for the long term, which have to service the customers for the next 30 years, 40 years, sometimes until even end of retirement, pension age. So these are very, very long-term commitments, and in fact, that is of course very promising when you look at such demographics. Whereas in the northern part of Asia, we are looking at very strongly aging populations, and also difficulties in managing these risks, because you don't have enough youth and new opportunity coming to the market, helping you to redistribute the risk between the demographics you have in the respective country.
And the challenges. I mean, you're entering a market that's probably not familiar with the concept of insurance, except me, at least the life and health. I mean, you know, maybe insuring your cars and your houses is, you know. But what were the main difference can you feel, particularly when you're, if we compare it with developed markets, you know, what was the approach like, and what were the stumbling blocks to, because it's all about trust, it's all about you know, communicating, it's all about convincing people or making people understand. So what has it been like?
I think there are multiple stakeholders in this game. You have regulators which go through a journey and help to develop this market, and you have insurance players like us who enter the market and want to play in that field and service the customers. Now, we have to create also a demand, right? So
that's right.
Today, the financial literacy in many of those countries is simply not that high as it is in developed market, which is one of the reasons why growth has been good, but from a very small base. So it's all forward-looking, the opportunity. I believe that we will see financial literacy growing, and awareness will grow. And with that, there will be also a higher demand, especially in the younger generation. Now, what will be the challenge is that also the customer behavior will be changing significantly. So if you think that we're going to distribute products in insurance or design products around insurance the same way as we did it in a developed market 20 years ago, and that will serve us here for future growth in the country, I don't think so. So we have to also become more, let's say, nimble, agile, and younger in our approach towards providing protection to the new generation, the younger generation, who has a different perception how to consume these products. Younger, even our generation is nowadays used to on demand. We want everything on the spot. Nobody has patience anymore.
It's all about app now, and everything. It has to have
less and less people want personal interaction. Today, still, because what you mentioned is important, trust. And if you have financial services, trust is an important factor. And today, the trust in a person is still bigger than it is in technology.
Yes,
but we see change. We see a very fast growth in the direct business, online business, even in financial services. Even here, if you look around, you would have already platforms selling mutual funds where 20-year-olds are purchasing on a monthly basis for small amounts and accumulating wealth. And in a country like Indonesia, these are quickly millions. And here we have to look at
In total, just not just Allianz, but as an industry, how big is the pie? How many people are actually have some form of insurance? I'm just curious. There are 275 million people, obviously, in Indonesia, and like you mentioned, there's your life, and there's your health, and there's your children's education. There's your things, your assets you want to insure. I mean, what does it look like in Indonesia at the moment?
Usually, we would always look first at insurance penetration and insurance density.
Which is how much?
The insurance penetration in Indonesia is around 2.3% as per OJK, which is not by itself a very representative number, because you also need to look at it, what is the density. So insurance penetration is related to GDP growth.
Okay.
So if your GDP is growing very strongly on a constant basis and your insurance market is a bit volatile or not growing continuously, then of course it will be difficult to catch up. Now, if you look at the insurance density, that expresses the distributed insurance premium among the population. And that, I think, gives a better picture. And here, the, I think, newest plan of OJK here and the vision of 2027 in the insurance program is to bring this premium to 2.4 million IDR, which is around 150 euro. So in comparison, in Germany today, the insurance premium per capita will be around 900 euro, which is around 15 billion IDR, I would say. And
in Indonesia, is how much in comparison?
Currently it's below 2 million.
2 million.
And the interim vision is to bring it up to 2.4.
2.4.
So 150, if you imagine 150 euro are spent on average by a person in the country to protect their wealth, their assets, their health, their lives, their relatives, that will be already a good starting step, I would say. And the more we drive that, the more we protect assets of the population. And when we protect that, also the population has the opportunity to grow. I mean, if you really have this trajectory of constant growth, we have to build, first of all, human capital. We have to build resilience, otherwise we will always do a step back. And certainly there is a part of the population which needs a proper public welfare, which is existing in established markets and sometimes not yet there in developed markets.
Sorry, just out of curiosity, in Germany, would you say that, what's the penetration like? I mean, is it almost everybody has some sort of insurance?
Some sort of insurance, I would say, yes, because here you would also see compulsory insurance. For example, third-party liability insurance is compulsory in Germany. So by nature, when you have a car or any vehicle, you need to insure that. And with that, we have a higher penetration. If you look at the overall picture, it is not that high. It's just close to 7%, because simply our GDP is very large, right? And that's why I said earlier, the direct relationship to GDP, I think, could be sometimes misleading, because you have fast-growing GDP, but it's not yet that big.
And we have a lot of, in terms of population, we have
continuously look at a low penetration rate. I think the density is something to look at more particularly. How much per capita have you spending in insurance to protect lives and property? And that's important.
I mean, that's one of the targets that we want to have by 2045, hopefully, $12,000, which actually, in terms of global terms, it doesn't sound that high, but it's a lot higher than what we have at the moment, obviously.
Younger generation will clearly inform themselves before taking decisions. So you would see a much more competitive market in terms of price sensitivity, service sensitivity.
Financial literacy, I mean, you mentioned this is obviously one of the challenges. If you don't know about the product, if you don't know why you need it, or if you don't know how to, or what it is to begin with. Just compared to, for example, the Philippines, because it's more or less kind of, you know, the similar developing country. How do you approach, you know, and how do you basically communicate this knowledge, particularly on financial literacy?
So in comparison, I think financial literacy, and I was actually quite surprised, according to the latest survey here done by the regulator, is above 30%, so which I consider to be
30% now.
Yes, which I consider high in Indonesia, also considering the overall population. It's definitely not in the same level in the Philippines, even though we haven't done the same study, but I can tell you it's high already. But what also was included in that type of survey is what is the level of inclusion. And the level of inclusion is rather low. It's half of that, around 16%. So this gives you already the amount of opportunity you have. You have people who are aware, but they're not included. Why is that? Because also why the penetration, for example, hardly changes, is that most of the insurers are, of course, mostly focusing on that space, which is very crowded, which is the upper affluent market.
Is that what it looks like in Indonesia? What's the profile of those who actually purchase insurance?
On life and health insurance, I would see it's still the upper income class. And the fastest growing part of this population is the middle class. And while we enter there, of course, all of us enter there, I think we also need to rethink how we can enter there, because you need new ways of access, again, also new ways of protection, because you're looking at a different generation. The biggest support for the upcoming middle class is the young generation coming into their profession, and those people we have to serve, and we have to serve differently than we did with their parents 10, 15 or 20 years ago.
Maybe you can share some of the strategy. I mean, we're talking about, you know, especially very demanding millennials and also generation, you know, Zs that are, you know, perhaps, you know, have a completely different idea of what the future looks like from them than, for example, the boomers and the generation X, you know, when we talk about managing risk or what they think are risks. How does it change?
I think the beauty is they're more aware, but the way we have to engage with them clearly is more digital. While I do think for a certain time there will be necessity for our type of business to have human touch, but it needs to be digitally enabled. It's not going to be only the friend network to set an appointment with an agent and then potentially meet and trust and then purchase. Yeah. So there will be more awareness simply by comparison. The more accessibility you have of the information nowadays, younger generation will clearly inform themselves before taking decisions. So you would see a much more competitive market in terms of price sensitivity, service sensitivity, and looking at the various benefits you can provide. Communication clearly has to be also via digital means. Let it be an app, but it needs to be available on demand. Nobody is going to be happy to schedule an appointment and then wait 2 days for an answer or something. This is not going to happen in future. I think it will be more embedded insurance, especially if you talk about non-life insurance. I think it's more a commodity product. It will be just embedded in certain services and then availed together with the service.
And also you have to have everything, you know, with an app these days. And then when you use the app, you also need to have lots of, you know, things that attract them, you know, freebies and vouchers and gifts, and because this is what, you know, young people are now like. They're really quite, you know, picky when it comes to how they consume and how they use. Whether it's social media or whether it's, you know, e-commerce, whether it's anything that's online, right? So
I fully agree. I mean, we're experimenting also with our we call it platinum customers. So that is still more for the top tier customers, where we have sorts of loyalty programs, which you would know similar to, I don't know, mileage programs of an airline. And yeah, here we have to think, how can we make it accessible for more the masses? Yeah? How can we make it more affordable?
And also the payment system has to be extremely easy, and
by now I think, and that's for me another big surprise when I came to this country, the level of direct payments is significant. The first 2 times I wanted to pay my coffee in rupiah, and had proudly my fresh printed money from the ATM in my hand. Everybody told me, sorry, it's cashless only.
Sorry, we only want your QR code. Yes, it's
so
true.
Yes, I mean, I think it's true for Jakarta. It might not be true for the entire of Indonesia.
I think it's beginning to be like that, but as we are getting more and more connected, which reminds me on how to increase the financial literacy. You said it's still quite low compared to developed countries, or compared to, for example, you mentioned Taiwan, or how?
Well, there are many parts. I mean, we will do our job as good as we can. We are building financial literacy through either our own foundation as part of our ESG programs. For social inclusion, we are driving a lot of community-based financial literacy programs. We of course work also with universities together in terms of how can we help developing curriculums, and there is a lot of opportunities for partnerships. We ourselves develop a large number of advisors on a yearly basis. We have around 50,000 financial advisors helping us to address protection needs of customers. By nature, they will help establishing a stronger financial literacy in the country as well. The regulator I mentioned, the roadmap for the next 5 years of OJK, financial literacy is a strong part of this as well.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, with everything digital, things like cyber crimes, frauds, and scams, and data theft, and so on and so forth. It's becoming quite a problem.
Yes, I think especially fraud and cybersecurity is a concern. We had just a big discussion this morning where in my former country, in the Philippines, the social security system was hacked, and basically the data of customers were leaked.
That also happened with us.
Has happened here, and so that's why we fortunately are part of a global company, and that is one of the elements where we can really strongly build trust, because we are building on a backbone of a global enterprise which has a very, very strong priority on IT security, data privacy, and then in fact also we are heavily regulated back in Europe in terms of data privacy, and the fines and sanctions are so significant that there is no way that we would ever allow any leakage there. So hence I think
Touch wood.
that
we don't know.
we always say
there's
that,
always
there's always risk, but I think we
absolutely.
are well set up to manage risks, and that's our core business anyway. So I think that is one opportunity where I think we can build trust with customers, and where we also gain and benefit from that.
Yeah. In terms of the industry itself and the regulation, how do you compare for the ease of doing business in the insurance industry? What more can be done to make this? I'm sure this is you can be quite honest in your answers, especially compared with other ASEAN countries. How?
Well, compared to other ASEAN countries, I think it's fairly at the same level. I think the only one I would compare with, which I would see as probably in the whole region more advanced, is MAS in Singapore, which is very strongly focusing on digital and having a strong enablement of a digital economy. So I think that's where other insurers or regulators of insurance in the Southeast Asian or even the overall Asian markets can catch up and potentially even partly learn from. Otherwise, I think regulation, which is essential, is in place. Now the question is, and that's what I like about the roadmap which they presented recently, is that we want to set the foundation, we want to consolidate, which is also important to really have scalability in the market. And then from there is opportunity to accelerate, which is clearly needed. If we accelerate at one stage, we need to have the foundation in place. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for regulators to manage. So I think that it's the right approach to go consolidate, have the right amount of insurance in place, have all the capabilities assessed to make sure these businesses can scale, and then stimulate and help the insurance companies to really fulfill the mission to increase eventually the penetration as well and faster grow than the
Absolutely.
GDP.
Well, we've got some very good roadmaps, but whether they get implemented, it's another thing.
Execution is key.
Execution is key.
Sharia segment I would see as almost still blue ocean, because it has 0.1, 0.2% penetration, and it has very, very fast growth.
But it's going to be even more challenging as we'll see a new government. They may chop and change things, but overall, how would you rate the ease of doing business in Indonesia at the moment? Because this is something that the government said. We're trying to attract investment. We're trying to increase our economic growth.
I think there's a difference between the country being attractive for investments versus the attraction of investors via certain stimulus.
Which ones are we? Are we attractive as a country? Or
the country is very attractive, and the demographics and the opportunities are very attractive. On the other side, I think the attraction and facilitation of investment, foreign investments in the countries, I would personally believe there is opportunities to reduce red tape and really bureaucracy and help the ease of business, as you say, because considering large investments, you would also see a reasonable time frame to see certain ROIs happening, and of course also given some risks and exposures, you have different expectations to your returns than you would have in a very secure environment and facilitated environment. So I think it's a balancing act, and I will believe everybody does their best to manage that to the maximum.
Yes, and I hope so too, because often you have very good roadmaps, you have very good blueprints, but then they get confused. How do we start implementing it? Who's in charge, and how is it going to be? It's supposed to be, everything's supposed to be sort of one stop. You want something a lot more efficient, obviously. You want something that takes a lot less time, but so far.
But again, you need to establish the environment for that. When you have a foundation, when you have made sure that there's good oversight of the companies, there's good understandings of the operating companies in this environment, then there is the possibility to scalability and then give also more leeway. Currently, I think it's still very challenging because it's a very reactive approach. There are a lot of problems which have to be addressed and a lot of changes ongoing. I'm the least person who can judge, as I'm still fairly new in this country, but what I see is a lot of exchange. I see a strong exchange between association, regulators, and insurance companies, which I do perceive as very helpful. One, for example, is IFRS 17 implementation, which we had already undertaken, as international companies, whereas on the local accounting side, there is still thoughts and discussions how to apply that. And obviously, it is a major change, which is not easy to undertake by everyone in the market. So clearly, there has to be maybe a two-tier system, which is currently suggested, to differentiate and ease the way of doing business. So I think there are good approaches, but currently it's more challenging environment to deal with. And at one stage, there will be the opportunity to focus more on the stimulus and the drive.
Well, what about the market itself, the demand? How challenging is what do you find the biggest challenge when it comes to trying to build demand? What is it that most Indonesians, whether of different classes or different age groups, what do you see the sort of the profile of insurance purchases like?
I would phrase it in opportunity. I see a huge opportunity by simply segmenting and differentiating. The biggest example, for example, is recently Sharia. There's a whole ecosystem built around Sharia. And we have spinned off just last week officially our Sharia company. And here in the country, 87% of the population are Muslim, right? And you will see a drive for this ecosystem for Sharia or halal type of products, whether it's food, fashion, or financial products. You see already a consolidated bank which is growing extremely fast in this country. So I think there is also a shift among the customers, and there is the opportunity to enter there and play in this field. Now, we cannot play the same way. Again, we have to see different approaches. And today we are in the upper segment, and if you want to go middle class and below and even micro segment, which is already targeted, then we need to have different approaches how to access these markets and serve these customers. Because obviously the same agent who is today serving the high-end market.
The higher market, what do they like? What's their...
They like protection, life insurance in particular, legacy planning, very, very important. How can I pass on wealth, for example, to the next generation? Health insurance to supplement is very important to people, especially when you have then services also for abroad treatments, has seen a lot of attraction. Now, this is not the same product which is necessarily affordable for somebody in the middle class. So the middle class might have the same need, but not the same budget. So therefore, you need to customize and revamp the proposition, maybe cater the proposition more targeted to the needs of this person. For example, a person who is more budget conscious might not need treatment in Singapore, might be also happy if they can do a checkup in KL instead of Singapore. So there are ways to do that, and it requires us to think more segmented and approach customers in a segmented way, because they also have very different, similar needs, but very different budgets. In
so
terms
are you
of
expanding your customer base?
Yes, I think that's the key, and that's also what we as a market should aspire for. We want to grow the customer base. We don't want to rotate the same customers among ourselves over and over again.
Any target, say, by 2027 at least?
Well, our strategy internally is very simple. We said double in 5. We want to double our customer base in 5 years' time, which translates to around 15% average growth year on year. And doesn't sound that big compared to our premium growth, which is around 15%, I would say. But I can tell it's challenging. First of all, we have customers who are, of course, receiving benefits. Unfortunately, some of them leaving us. And with that, we have natural attrition to our customer base, which we have to rebuild first. And then on top of that, we have to grow. So it is challenging, but I do believe with all the opportunities, something.
But what about competition? I mean, how crowded is the insurance business in India? Is there still plenty of room? Is it still a blue ocean, or is it already a red ocean with people vying for the same customers?
Today,
in the same way?
the upper income market is definitely a red
A
ocean.
red ocean. So
Sharia segment, I would see as almost still blue ocean because it has 0.1, 0.2% penetration, and it has very, very fast growth rates. We see 3-4 times the growth rates in that segment. So definitely needs also a blue ocean strategy. We need to find access to the people. You need to think about communities most likely to enter here. We need to have dedicated products. It also follows different principles. We cannot offer the same products like conventional. It's a very, very different approach, but a significant opportunity. Hence our commitment to spin off and launch the Allianz Sharia in the country.
and how is it coming along? What's the feedback?
It's I was very pleased myself last week having the press event and launch event publicly, and finding our vice president joining and endorsing it, and actually quoting also him that he is wishing that companies will be as efficient in pushing through in entering this business segment and really driving it. And as I said, I believe that is an ecosystem by itself. If you have literacy of 30% already here, I would not be surprised in a few years' time if you bring this up to 60-70% already.
But all the other companies, I mean, all the other financial institutions are focusing more and more on the Sharia. I mean, it really is in an ecosystem that is very, the potentials are huge. But what are you doing different to your
the main
competitors? I mean, you have to, to have some kind of, whether it's a unique competitive advantage or whether it's a strategy that is based on innovation and creativity.
I think it's, first of all, it's a strategy because, as I said, there will be consolidation. So there will be a natural selection who can do Sharia business in future, simply by regulator defined. Either we spin off and separate the business by, I think currently it's determined 26. Then you can operate under a Sharia license. If not, then you have to discontinue this business. So therefore, we have developed a dedicated strategy, and the strategy is really focused on how can we serve now the mass markets and how can we build access to this market. Clearly, through financial advisors is one of the biggest. Another angle is banking. Bank assurance is still one strong pillar of customer access in this country. And there are still banks which are also very much focused on Sharia business, which we are happily collaborating with and seeking further collaborations. And the last one is clearly product innovation. As said, conventional products, Sharia products are managed differently, are catering to different parts of the population, and with that I think we will also see a stronger design and communication path to these type of customers who are really differentiating and saying like, I want specifically Sharia. But we might even see in this country conventional customers also being attracted and buying Sharia products because we have seen it the other way around, so I wouldn't be surprised if even conventional customers would show a certain interest.
Just to go back on this idea of insuring, and for example, in Indonesia, we have our national health insurance, which I personally think it's amazing for a country like Indonesia to have some kind of blanket coverage for everybody. I mean, we know countries like even the United States, they don't have this kind of this safety net. But the idea of, this goes back to understanding, managing risk, and about looking at the future. I mean, the insurance itself. I mean, in the developed countries, you've been around for 133 years. What is it that creates the shift in people to say, look, I need to cover myself. I need to assess my risk and mitigate it. Yeah. How does that evolve in the society until they become sort of aware of what, you know?
Well, I hope we can create the awareness earlier than the need appears. If you look at Germany, we have a very good social security system, but unfortunately, where we had a demographic pyramid, it's now inverted. So hence the costs and the burden for the young generation to contribute for the older generation in the social system is a significant burden. And salaries haven't improved that much or grown that fast. So nowadays, I think for a pensioner, today 1.5 people need to support one pensioner. In the past, it was 5 young
supporting
starters supporting one pensioner. So there's an evident need, and clearly the system won't work anymore. Now here, the system is there. You have a young population. You can contribute to it, but you can imagine on this scale, it will become and is a financial burden for the government to maintain that in the long run. And I think we spoke at the very beginning about public welfare. I think we need to reduce the dependency on public welfare as much as we can. And insurance companies can play a significant role here by supplying to the market such protection elements to establish resilience, make sure that people are taking care of their wealth, their health, and all other types of assets in the progress of their lives and throughout their life cycle. We hope to be there and offer affordable products.
But just very quickly, especially Indonesia is a very young nation. How do you convince young people that they're not going to live forever? I mean, young people say, I'm young. Why should I, set aside some of my money in order to think of something like that may or may not happen?
I think there's a certain trend where you see actually the young generation being more conscious about the fact, the same as they're more conscious about climate change, and more demanding in terms of sustainability.
So you can feel the shift, that there is this
definitely
need, demand.
I would think it's related also to the vast amount of information accessible. In my age as a teenager, I didn't have the access. I could read books and could gather information from newspapers.
And insurance is for something that your parents talk about. I mean, this is not something that's
and
part
now
of your...
it's unlimited, right? So whether it's in community, social media, everywhere, and it will grow. If you have literacy of 30% already here, I would not be surprised in a few years' time if you bring this up to 60, 70% already. If this is embedded in curriculums at school, if there is enough efforts by the ESG programs of especially the international players and local players to really drive inclusion and social responsibility, these things will play a big role, and I think there will be strong acceleration and there is more consciousness about it. Now the question is, knowing it, can I match that with an attractive proposition at the right price?
Okay, say for example, I've just started work, I've graduated, I'm like in my early 20s. What would you say to me to convince to have some kind of coverage? And I said, well, no, that's not really top of my list at the moment. But what kind of things can you say? Well, no, but you have to do this and that and whatever. What would you say to them?
I think it's a life cycle. You start as a young graduate, so you need basic protection somehow. You want to protect your assets. So health insurance will be clearly number one.
My parents can deal with that.
Or,
say for example.
I think that is one of the burdens, right? Having this perception of the family will take care is I think the biggest concern you have in Asia, where this culture of belonging and community is existing, because it is serving an excuse to take care of yourself. So that's a very different and opposite belief to what we grew up as as Europeans,
Here
we
it's all
are
about extended families.
we are very much about independency, moving out, establishing our own life, still the connectivity with family, but we don't stick together and we don't rely on each other. And our system allows our parents to rely on themselves later when they're old, and the young generation wants to be self-established and sustain themselves as well. Now here in Asia, I have the feeling sometimes it's still more clingy, and family subsidizes each other, or extended family. So if there's a tragedy in the family, everybody will chip in, we fix it, right? Well,
What have you learned? What is, you know, sort of like, wow, you know, this...
First of all, it's a very diverse country. So not only it has diverse religions and cultures, I was fortunate enough, I didn't travel too much, but at least I saw 2 places or 3 places already. I was traveling in Java and saw Borobudur, which I found very impressive and architecturally amazing. Then I had 2 leisure trips, which was, one of them was Lombok for diving, which gave me an idea about the beauty of the maritime life in Indonesia, which is incredible. And lastly, I most recently went to Sumba, which is a more remote island with not yet really all infrastructure, and you can basically visit and see very rural, basic communities, which definitely haven't thought about insurance or anything like that so far. So that was quite eye-opening, and seeing this diversity. Sumba being very Christian, right? Having Bali, for example, with again different religion type, and then Borobudur. And it's interesting. What I perceive Indonesia so far is very liberal. It's nice to see that all this can live together in harmony without any conflicts or any major disputes, other than football stadiums, I heard. Seems to be sensitive.
Or politics.
Or politics.
The disputes. Well, I'm impressed. In 6 months you've seen quite a bit. But Alex, thank you so much for your time and your insight. And I hope you do get to stay long, because you have a very high target to achieve in 5 years' time. So I hope for your sake that you'll be able to achieve those targets.
I hope so, that I will be around to achieve these targets. I hope it can be managed in 5 years. If it takes 6 years, it doesn't matter, it's still good. And we will be very happy.
That way you get to know Indonesia even better.
Even better, and I will see Raja Ampat hopefully also.
Okay, well, good luck. And, you know, I'm glad that you seem to like Indonesia a lot. Ya, demikian Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini. Terima kasih juga atas perhatian Anda. Jangan lupa Anda dapat menyaksikan acara ini di cnnindonesia.com dan juga di YouTube CNN Indonesia Insight with Desi Anwar. Sampai jumpa. Bye-bye.